Good afternoon, RSA 2024. How is everyone doing? Thank you for being good sports about that. I hope everyone had a great lunch. I hope you are keeping going during these absolutely marathon couple of days where we all come to learn from each other and learn from amazing speakers like the ones I'm about to introduce. Just a quick about myself. My name is Maggie McAlpine. I'm the cybersecurity evangelist for a little company called Sekion. We mostly sell cybersecurity solutions to MSPs. If that's something you are ever interested in, come talk to me. That's the only thing I'll say about it. I've been coming to RSA and emceeing the stage for several years now, on and off, minus a couple of years we don't speak of in the middle there. And I'm really pleased and really honored to be able to introduce our speakers today. They're going to be giving us their wisdom of cumulative years of experience in founding, supporting, running cybersecurity companies. I think this is a subject that's interesting to all of us, maybe now or in the future. So let me, please join me in welcoming our speakers today, Robert Ackerman, Debbie Gordon, Stuart McClure, and you just changed the order on me, so I don't know, and Robert Lee. Thank you, and please welcome them.
Always the tall chairs.
All right. I'm just kind of fascinated with what's going on over here.
I know. I want to get in the dark arts sandbox. So.
You need to invite them over.
Well, thank you very much for the introductions, and thank you all for joining us for this conversation. This is something we did last year, and they asked us to do it again this year. And so hopefully we'll impart the benefits of scar tissue to you, and hopefully you can avoid some of that scar tissue as you embark on your own journey. My name is Bob Ackerman. I'm a recovering entrepreneur, but today really the founder and managing director of Allegis Cyber Capital and the co-founder of Data Tribe. So I'm on the investing side of cybersecurity. I've been investing in cybersecurity and building cyber companies for 24 years at this point in time. So I went from being paranoid to being semi-cool. And that wasn't me, that was the market that led me on that journey. But really, really pleased to have three very different but very complementary entrepreneurs sharing this conversation with us today. To my immediate left is Debbie Gordon, who's the CEO and founder of CloudRange. And next to Debbie is Rob Lee. I have the pleasure of serving on Rob's board. Rob is the founder and CEO of Dragos in the industrial security space. And then Stu McClure, who I've also had the benefit of serving on boards with, and having been one of his investors. Stuart today is the CEO of Quiet AI. And so a totality of experience over a range of companies and over a range of financing scenarios. And our objective today really is to, I often describe building a startup as running through a minefield naked in the middle of the night. There's a couple ways to get through that. One is on your hands and knees, slowly crawling through the minefield, hoping you don't make a mistake or make as few mistakes as possible, because those mistakes can be catastrophic, or get a map. And our intent today is to provide you with the benefit of a map. And if we can give you some hints, give you some cues, things based on our collective experience that will de-risk the journey from concept to successful execution, that's our hope. We're going to try and leave a little time at the end for questions. We've got about 3 hours worth of material, and we've got 50 minutes to cover it. But we'll try and be disciplined about this conversation. So
be speedy.
So I'm going to start just a moment or two for each of you, just a little bit about your company and your entrepreneurial background, just to sort of set the table stakes. So Debbie, let's go with you first.
Sure. Thanks for doing this, Bob. I'll go from now back. I founded CloudRange 6 years ago. We are a new category, relatively speaking. We build cyber ranges for companies to proactively prepare for cyber attacks. So we're a vendor and agnostic and neutral platform. So we're working with companies around the world to help them prepare for cyber attacks in a very safe environment, similar to how a flight simulator prepares pilots. My entrepreneurial journey, gosh, I think I knew I was different when I was 15. But it's been a long time. I started my first company in 1999, and this is my third and a half venture. One was an IT asset management company prior to this, and then an e-commerce company in the early 2000s. We were talking earlier, and it's very different how we think about entrepreneurship. Are you a subject matter expert or are you an entrepreneur? And I'm an entrepreneur who has become a subject matter expert, but it's in my DNA, and it's what I do for fun and to do good for the world.
And you've taken, we're going to get more into this, but I really want to tease out your journey to financing your company, because it's a very, very different approach that you've taken, and we're going to tease that out as we go forward. Yeah. Rob?
Sure. Yep. So Rob Lee, I founded Dragos 8 years ago. We're in the industrial security space, right? And so all we really focus on is operation technology and kind of all the stuff in there. The company itself is a tech company, but we try to partner with our clients more than just sell them a product by having like the services and intel piece too, trying to be there for them on their worst days as well with like instant response. It's been fun to watch what happens in the operations side of the house. I mean, I think 8 years ago, OT was not something a lot of people talked about. Now people realize it's the critical part of critical infrastructure. So it's kind of gone a very nice direction. I went more the subject matter expert into the entrepreneur journey. So I started out in the Air Force, spending my time at the National Security Agency there, building out the government's mission, looking at state actors, breaking into industrial infrastructure. And when I got out, I had no intent of starting a company. At the same time that I was there, I was authoring and teaching classes at SANS. Really, really liked that, loved my students, thought I was just gonna go do that. And then in 2015, the Ukraine attack took place on the power systems there. And I got called back. So I just left government, and I got called back to go help lead the investigation there. And when I came back and briefed the White House and all the other people around the room, there was like CSOs going, yeah, if they would have like patched their servers and stuff, they would have been fine. I'm like, that had nothing to do with the attack. And so I called my co-founders and said, hey, I'd really like my kids to have lights and water one day. We're gonna need to do a company because this IT stuff is not working over here. And so that led me to starting the company. I didn't know how long I was going to do it, but I haven't screwed it all up yet, so I'll do it until they tell me that I'm screwing it up. So, yeah.
You're not screwing it up.
I love it. Yeah, no. So yes, hi, Stuart McClure. I am CEO of Quiet AI. We are AI for AppSec. So we auto-find and auto-fix using predictive and generative models inside the AppSec or code science space. I'm not a founder of this company. I took it over 2 years ago as CEO because I saw some magical capabilities inside the tech. It truly was differentiated out in the market, and I wanted to apply AI into this world. Before Quiet, I started a company called Cylance. Cylance was in 2012, and that was by far and away the fastest growing startup that I had ever been involved with, and I think to this day probably still has a couple of records, but at the end of the day, I learned a lot from hypergrowth. And so now do things a little bit differently. But yeah, so sold to BlackBerry, that company in 2019. And before that, I was global CTO for McAfee. So again, bigger company and sort of a bigger position, but global. And then before that, I was a founder of Foundstone. And Foundstone was one of the very first vulnerability management platforms out there that could actually scale. It scaled to very large enterprises and governments. And we sold that to McAfee 5 years after we started it. And then, of course, all the books that I've been writing over the years, Hacking Exposed, and all the editions, I'm the founding father of that book series, along with a few others. So been doing this a long time, usually from the adversary perspective, but now obviously balance both defense and offense.
Well, appreciate that. Let's jump in. All three of you, have actually been involved in building companies in which defining a new category has been part of the mission. And sometimes telling that story can be a challenge. Rob, going back to the early days with Dragos, right? We're talking to the venture community, and they're like, there is no industrial security market. It's like, I don't get it. What's the big deal? Let's talk a little bit about not just the importance of a narrative, which I think goes without saying, but how do you develop the narrative, and the journey to developing it. And since I picked on you, Rob, let's start with Dragos.
Yeah, I think, that was definitely interesting. I took 123 venture capital meetings when we started getting going. And that is definitely something I don't advise anybody else to ever do that themselves. But it was very much like, this doesn't make sense, industrial security isn't a thing. You don't look like the other companies that I want to put in the spreadsheet. And I got kind of like burnt out pretty quickly on that of, you're the disruption people and innovation and everything else, but because I don't fit in the spreadsheet the same way, you don't want to fund us, that doesn't seem very innovative. So we're very lucky to run across Bob and Data Tribe to start with, and then it all became much simpler when people started seeing the revenue, and then the investors cared a whole lot less about the story. But what was really important on the story was educating the customers. That piece was by far the most important things for us, is regardless of what the analysts would say or do on the venture side, if customers were calling up going, no, I get it, and it's different, and I'm willing to buy, that speeds up a conversation pretty quickly. And the key to talking to the customers for us was authenticity. We didn't come out with buzzwords. There's very few companies that have like a real AI story, like Stu's is one of them, but everyone here this week, AI, 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 and like you all know what's crap. You know the company that launches a big AI whatever, and they were actually only developing it 3 months ago, or the other ones that were like, this is AI now, and it was just like a chat GPT, like reskin for like a chat bot and stuff. Like what bad looks like, and it's really disheartening when people don't think that customers are smart enough to see through that. And so for us, we never used the buzzwords, we never used like scare tactics. It was, here's what we're seeing, here's the experience we had. If you see the world the way we do, then this is the answer, and we're here to help you. And that authenticity in every way we approached it really carried us. And there's a lot of people that will tell you not to do that, and marketing firms and people of other companies, oh, you need to do this instead, or so forth. And I would just say, take your own journey, but for mine, I would tell you that staying true to the mission and being authentic in how you communicate was probably the best thing that we did.
People pick up on authenticity real quick, right? Because you stand out in the crowd at the end of the day. Stu, you've been through this rodeo a few times at this point in time. What are you thinking?
Well, I've had almost sort of every variant, to be honest, I think. So with Cylance, I started out as explaining it as, oh yeah, we're going to use decision tree learning and sort of early, machine learning techniques. And of course, I got the instant like glaze, right? And then they would say, well, what is that? And I'd say, well, it's math. Right? It's mathematics, and then they'd instantly go to sleep. So I would lose them like really fast. And then I realized, wait, I actually need to explain it a little bit differently. And so I'll just call it AI. And no one could spell AI in 2012. This was when I was pitching Cylance. I mean, not a one, especially in cyber. And so I actually learned I couldn't even use AI at that time. And if you go back to the very first pitch deck for Cylance, we pitched ourselves as the Blackwater for cyber. Now, if you remember back in the day, Blackwater were these contract mercenaries that would go out into field and deliver on whatever military.
Were you the Eric Prince in this scenario?
I wish. I wish. And but that's what resonated. So we used that. And of course, we pivoted into the space of endpoint protection beyond, but that's what it needed at the time. And even though I had a pretty darn good record already, between the CTO McAfee and Foundstone exiting well, and it is just a real finicky market to go after, the venture market, and getting them to see your vision, especially when it's something really far down there. And it is super challenging. I mean, you said what, 123 was it?
123.
123. And yeah, to me, I'm like, yeah, if you're not willing to do 333 of these things, like, don't even start. Like, you're probably just going to be so exhausted really quickly. You have to literally just have to get titanium skin and literally just show up every single time you're going to do this as the exact same excitement and authenticity and see what happens. But my last thought on this is what I've learned, if you can tell an audience, especially investors, about your vision and where you're going and what you're doing, the best response you can get is, I don't get it. Now, why I think that is the best response? Because if you're telling them something that they don't get, that means they don't hear about it, right? They've never really sort of heard about this space. And with your conviction and knowing the market and knowing the solution that you're going to go and fit in the market, you now know, you have a tell in a way of what's going to be the next big thing. So that's how I always think of it.
That's fast. That's a fascinating perspective. I haven't thought about it that way. Debbie?
So, and if somebody says they don't get it, I just wanted to comment on this. That is the best time to adjust the narrative, and so that's a great reason to change how you're saying them. I think, just in my experience, the stakeholders in your narrative are investors, analysts, and customers, and the market being customers. And it's going to be similar, but you have to adjust it to everybody and play around with it. Everyone on my team, Tom's here, words matter. Every word matters, and I'm a huge user of analogies, and so making your narrative relatable. If it's so technical that people don't get it, then it's not going to work. But if you can make it relatable, related to something, just as an example, one thing we do, I talked about simulation. Simulation is used in many fields. Practice is used in many fields. So, we relate it to practicing the piano or practicing sports. Everyone gets that. So find ways to relate it. And then the other thing is just continue to have consistency in the message, whether it's, through the media to customers, in your decks, and when you talk to people, consistency, and just listen. The other thing is that creating a new space means people aren't calling you and asking for it. In 1988, people didn't say, hey, I need a device that I can make phone calls on and I can surf the internet thing that doesn't exist yet and wake me up in the morning and all this. Didn't exist, so people weren't looking for it. So if it's new, make sure you explain to people that this doesn't exist, so they're not trying to relate it to something that they already know or another type of product.
Yeah, I'm going to go off script. That didn't last very long. And talk about about fundraising, right? Because one of my observations is entrepreneurs don't spend nearly enough time identifying and qualifying the people they're going to reach out to for funding. And there's the real, cyber's a little bit, there's a little cyber mafia in the venture community. It's a very small group of people. It's about 10 people, in my humble opinion, that actually know what they're talking about. But if you look at the venture world in general, it's a lot of generalists that have very little specific domain knowledge in most cases. And the times that somebody reaches out to me with a major breakthrough in life sciences that, given my portfolio, they know I'll be interested in, says, you actually have no idea what I do. You don't know anything about what I'm interested in. You're wasting your time and you're wasting my time. And so I want to talk a little bit about your experience in identifying, who you should identify and how you identify those people where there is going to be a predisposition to at least have a conversation with you. Because the first, the purpose of the first meeting is get in the door, tell the story. What's the purpose of the first meeting? It's to get to a second meeting. But too much time and energy is spent just indiscriminately calling the world and finding victory in that somebody will talk to you. In fact, it could be a total waste of time. So I'd like to get your guidance on the process of identifying who it is you're going to reach out to and how you prioritize. And Stu, let's start with you again.
I think it depends on maybe two scenarios, right? One is, are you starting from scratch? And are you starting with an idea that's a little ahead of its time or something that's sort of catching the wave of hype, whatever hype cycle you're on? I think that's an easy distinction. Then the other one is, are you sort of later stage and trying to raise, and what kind of technology you have? I do think that, when it comes to that brand new idea, you have to find investors that invest first in the team. Because if they believe in you as an individual or as a team, it almost doesn't matter to the idea. Yes, it does, but just almost doesn't. Like, they'll just want to follow you because you're you, or because you've had a level of success, or they believe in you personally. I've seen that time and time again. But the trick is really, truly, and so when you have that first call, just ask simply, hey, what's, team tech market, what's your primary, sort of alignment or thesis? And if they say, well, we really go market team tech, and then you're like, okay, well, probably not for you, and just cut it off right there. Also, I had a fun one. Actually, I'll share this one. So I was fundraising recently for another startup that I'm doing, and she actually said at the end of it, Stu, I usually invest in younger teams. Oops. I said, okay, thank you very much. sorry I can't, get in the time machine anymore, but maybe I'll invent that one day and then I'll come back. So you have to get to that really fast. The quicker you can get to it, the better. Like I was just at lunch with the Singaporean team, won't say names. They had passed twice on me at silence, so we couldn't get them in. And I said, well, third time's got to be a charm, right? Like, I mean, how much more success can I show you I can do? I mean, I'm not sure, but I could tell within 5 minutes they had no interest. They were just fishing. And so I just said, hey, guys, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate you taking it out. And, when you guys get a little bit more sort of focused on where you want to put, the money for this next fund, please give me a shout.
I know what you were thinking. I know what you were actually thinking.
Yeah. And I walked out, and with all respect, I mean, they're really nice people. They're nice people,
Yeah.
but they're just not aligning to where I need them to align to. So, why waste everybody's time?
Yeah, and that whole point of getting to a no as fast as you can, whether you're getting the no or you're coming to the no,
Yeah.
and free up the time, redeploy that time against a better target. So
Yeah.
Rob, what about you?
I met them yesterday.
Did you
Same
too?
experience.
Same thing.
Anyway, so
We all know who we're talking about.
anyway, so yeah. Look, I completely agree with you on the qualifying, but I'll take a bit of a different spin, I think, too. One, I mean, it is the qualifying on where you actually think a deal is going to get done. Like, there was a point where I started asking investors, like, hey, what are the other cyber companies you've invested in?
Yeah.
And did you hold on to them? Did you sell them? Did you IPO them? Like, what's your fund set up to do? Because everyone's like, we can do it all. Just like every security vendor, every VC is like, we can slice, we can dice, we can support you everywhere. Like, yeah, that's nice, but what have you done? Have you actually invested in cyber tech companies? And for us, it was always important to go the long distance. I didn't want to sell the company. Like, the mission that we were on was more important to me than the valuation, to be honest, of like getting an exit. It was an IPO eventually is going to be a growth round, not an exit. So can you go that distance? Just be honest with me. Show me that you've done it. And and if people hadn't invested in cyber companies, I would say, like, look, I'm happy to spend time with you, but you're not going to be in this round because you're not going to be able to get spun up on cyber and tech and then OT. It's too much. I know it's not going to happen. So I'll still take the meeting, but let's do an informational discussion. Let's do an education session. So I would take a ton of venture capitalist meetings, and Darren, my CFO, is an investment banker before, and he kind of get frustrated at me sometimes, like, dude, you're still taking all year round all of these meetings, like for almost everybody that wants to come talk to you. I'm like, yeah, none of them are going to invest, or we wouldn't even want the ones that are going to invest, but they're going to take notes. They're going to go talk to all their firm buddies.
Right.
They're going to talk to other venture community. And I'm going to help build that story and build that narrative, and I'm going to prove it out over time, and then they're going to be competing to get in later stage. And so there was folks that we talked to that were like D round, E round type investors that I was talking to in the A round, that now that we're looking at an E round in the future, they're coming back to the table and go, Rob, you told us this 7 years ago, you did it, okay, we got it, we got our thesis on this, how do we get in the E round? And so I thought that was very useful for those long-term relationships. And so I'd maybe talk to too many, but I think that's been fine. But again, it's also about who's going to be in your corner. Like, I knew early on Allegis was going to hold long periods of time. I knew Energy Impact Partners was going to do that. When BlackRock came and talked to us, they were like, yeah, you're a rounding error, we'll hold forever. I'm like, okay, cool. So it was just developing the right relationships, but letting them all go tell stories, because they all take notes in every meeting, they all put it in their version of a CRM, and then they all go trade stories at cocktail parties and coffee meetups. Just make sure your story is consistent and it's the right one that you want to get out there and build those relationships. I do think getting to know is good, but I think it's equally important to also set up people with the opportunity to be wrong long term.
Yep.
And then they go, oh, I missed out. I don't want to miss out again. And the fear of missing out with investors is very, very real.
Yep. Debbie?
Just to add on to that, you are selling them as much as they are selling you. Mm-hmm. There's a product there, and it's you, and they want it. And my first round, I was like, oh, goody, they want to talk to me. I get a meeting. And then my attitude changed, because we were new then. I mean, it was almost 3 years after I founded the company, but when we went for outside funding, it was a few years. And we were early revenue. And then in the next round, I had a very different sentiment about it, because I said, I had a lot more control, because I knew what we had was valuable versus hoping they thought what I had was valuable. And so it changed it. And then the other thing is, the culture, Stuart touched on this a little bit, you're not old.
Thank you.
No problem. Culture is so important, and for better or for worse, there's different ways that investors will work with you, and some have, high volume investments and they want a few to be successful. Others say, we only make 3 or 4 a year and we're going to really work closely with them. And, one's not right or wrong. But it's the kind of questions you should ask. I always ask, why would your founders, what would they say about you, and what do they like working, why do they like working with you? Because then you can get an idea of how, it puts them on the spot a little bit, but you can get an idea of what their value proposition is. Because a lot of people will say, oh, we're going to help you, we're going to make all these intros and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, they're just trying to sell you. So. And not everybody, but ask questions. You have as much control over it. They want you, and so have the confidence in what you're doing to know that you have that control.
Yeah, I think the duality of that conversation is really, really important, because there is nothing worse than being in a long-term relationship with a partner that you can't wait to get away from. And everybody will talk about the value that they bring, and I think in their own minds they actually think they bring value. The vast majority of them, in fact, don't. And so, if you're in a position where you get to choose, and I wish that for all of you, is exercising your prerogative to get to know them, to challenge them. Do your due diligence. Talk to people they've backed in the past, because at some point in time, you're going to be in trench warfare. And you got to decide, do I want to be in trench warfare with these people? Are they going to be part of the solution, or are they going to be part of the problem? I have never seen a venture capitalist make a company successful. Yeah. Okay? I've seen them help significantly along the way, but I have seen venture capitalists destroy companies because it's a bad fit, it's a bad culture, it's bad personality, it's bad juju, it's bad something or other. And the last thing in the world you want to do is put the time, the energy, the sweat, the vision, the hopes, into building something, only to have your ability to realize the objective compromised by a bad choice of partner. And so take the time, do the work, do the due diligence, check the references. Because there will be, everybody goes into these things expecting it straight up from here, can't wait till we're all done and we cross the finish line. That is not how it works. And so taking the time to thoroughly vet the people that you're working with and understanding on a case-by-case basis what value they're going to bring. How are they going to de-risk the proposition? How are they going to accelerate your growth? How are they going to make fundraising in the future easier? How are they going to help you with market engagement? And challenge them to articulate that, and then validate that articulation. Becomes very, very important. Let's talk a little bit about product market fit, which I think is sort of the Achilles heel for just about every startup. You start with a vision of how the world's going to be a better place as a result of you and your team stepping onto the stage, but finding that product market fit in a way that you have conviction in, but the market embraces, and that journey. And Stu, you've been through this a couple times. We've talked about it. How do you find product market fit?
Well, I can tell you my 2 real-world examples, right? One was Foundstone, which was vulnerability management. We took a bit of a tack. We had just come from Ernst & Young, so we had a lot of great relationships there with customers and partners, et cetera, that were very willing to help go along for the journey. But we also had a very hungry cyber community. Like, no one was talking about cyber back then. It was just this small group of rejects, us basically, going to things like DEF CON, right, and early days of Black Hat and such. So we had really fertile ground, but we still needed those first 3 to 5 sort of customers, design partners. And in many ways it's the same here. So when I started with Cylance, we certainly had a whole bunch of folks that we could have and we did leverage for design partners. But we also really believed in services as a parlay into product. And I did that fairly successfully at Foundstone as well. So we decided, hey, why don't we build a services team to help build and bridge the gap between us starting with an idea and us delivering on a product V1, and then those customers can be the design partners. And that was a very natural technique for me, and I still to this day believe in that model. I think
But were you getting pushback from your investors along the way? On the services piece?
always, yeah. Like, wait, I don't get this. I don't get it. Okay, good. That's where I want you to be. You don't get it. It's okay, because services to product parlay is an incredibly powerful fulcrum for you if you can make it work. There is one little secret about making that work, though, is you've got to find whoever heads up services to be a product guy or gal. They have to be oriented to delivering on product, not more and more and more services. Because once that flywheel gets going on services and they start to realize, wow, I can scale this sucker, I gotta hire another body, they're off to the races. You can't bring them back. Like, they're just gone. So as long as they're oriented product and all of their services are oriented towards the delivery of new features in the product, then that model works really, really well. So that I've taken a little bit of a different tactic than the traditional, like just find a design partner, but it's more of a trusted advisor design partner, somebody that already trusts you. So that to me is a big part of it, because you have to have those early adopters that are willing to take the risk, and not many are.
Well, and Rob, you had a very similar journey, given where the industrial market is, the time that Drago sent it into the markets. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, the services path was definitely key for us. The narrative that competitors and others wanted to spin, though, was, oh, they're just a services company. So you got to be careful on the controlling of that as well, because it's easier not to go head and head in a technical POC if you can convince the customer that, well, they're just a service company. They don't even have a product, and that's happened to us in the early stage. But services did two things for us. One, it allowed us to show our commitment to the customer on, we'll be your partner. I want to sell you tech. I'll be open about it. I want to sell you tech, but I can help you on the way. This is new for you. You haven't done this before. I can be your partner on this journey. And then two, it was amazing to have the insights from the service professionals on making the product better. So I didn't need as many design partners. I had experts in the house that they use the product too, and they're pushing for features as fast, if not faster, than customers. And in product market fit, I would say you just gotta be honest with yourself. Like, there are so many folks that come up with a cool way to do something and there's no need there. And they just still wanna obsessively chase that. And they'll talk to the customer all day long about, look at how we're solving it, not look at what we're solving. And they just get obsessed with this cool tech demo or pitch deck of, oh, we're doing this differently and this differently and this differently, when they just don't understand the customer just wants the outcome. Like, what are you gonna solve for me? Let's focus on that. How you do it, I care a little bit less about. The other piece, though, is you gotta have expertise. And so you don't have to be the subject matter expert into the entrepreneur, but you better get there. And you mentioned, like, I got there. Like, you have to get there, because it's almost like your own market research of, is the problem I'm trying to solve? Maybe it's a real problem, but is it solvable in this way? Like, I sit on a nonprofit board, and they wanted to do like cybersecurity education, because they hear about cybersecurity skills gap all the time. And they're like, there's just nobody going to like the smaller rural areas and doing that, and we're gonna spend all this money to do that. I'm like, yeah, here's these 5 firms that do that. Oh, well, we could do it better. What's your comparative advantage? Like, why are you gonna do it better? Well, we have really smart people that do this. I'm like, yeah, but it's actually that's not the real problem. The real problem for a lot of those schools that you're talking about is not getting people excited about cybersecurity. It's that entry-level jobs are broken in this country. They talk about 700,000 skill gaps, but like, look at the HR systems, that an entry-level job needs a master's degree and a SANS cert, or an entry-level job needs 5 years of experience in a 3-year-old technology. I was like, that's the bigger problem. It's not the training. We got the training piece. It's this over here. And so they just were so excited to help with all the right intent, but they had no idea why the problem existed, so anything they were going to throw at it just wasn't going to be effective. So then you just got to be expert enough to know why the problem exists, and to make sure it's actually a problem that people want to solve, and be a little less obsessed with the how. That can be cool inside your company, but for most customers, it's not the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Debbie?
Yeah, and the third element on that is, make sure there's a problem you're solving and that you can solve it. But then also, will it work from a financial perspective? Will companies actually part with their money to buy what you have and make it worthwhile? So if you build it, they will not necessarily come. And if they come, you have to figure out the commercial side of it. We all, just a little more tactical. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs in very early startups, and they always, they think they have to build something in its entirety to bring it to market. And one of the things that a lot of people forget to do is go talk to people. people in your potential customer base love sharing their ideas and love sharing their problems, and they love, for any prospective entrepreneurs here, talk to people, ask questions. Is this something that's useful? How would you measure the value and the outcomes of it? Listen to that and help it craft your product. The other thing is, back to not building the whole thing first. It's okay to have something where you're doing a little bit more manually behind the scenes instead of going out and automating everything. Might take a little more work, but you're not making the huge investment to go all the way without proving something out. So just being really diligent about the process, asking a lot of questions, and listening. Because again, just because it's a great idea and you may be solving a problem, is it the right problem, and will people part with their money for it?
It's interesting. I just, when you talk about this, I just flashed back to a conversation Rob and I had in a webinar we did whenever we did that 4 months ago, whatever it was. And one of the things about our communities, we tend to be very, very technical in most cases. As time goes on, we become less technical. It's just a byproduct of kind of more marketing people and less technical people. But all too often, you find an organization, an entrepreneur, talking to a customer, let's call it a CISO, about the superiority of the technology and how fascinating the technology is and how miraculous the technology is, never realizing or never stopping to think, customer's not buying technology, doesn't really care. At some point in time, they'll care, it'll be the proof statement. But Rob made the point, it's like align with the prioritized problems that the customer is allocating dollars to. The customer buys solutions to problems, doesn't buy technology. Rob, you want to talk about that just for a moment? Because that was just a really insightful.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think sort of doubling back on that, it's also important to make sure, right, that you can do it. Again, back to the authenticity. And if you're going to tell the customer they're wrong, you better have a lot of expertise to have that conversation. Like I get in meetings with CISOs all the time. They're like, I don't know about OT, we just need to go patch our systems. I'm like, okay, here's the data behind why that will not achieve your result. It's not my opinion, here's the data behind how that's not gonna help you. And I was talking to my CRO, we had a pretty combative prospect, if you will, and they definitely just wanted to dunk on every salesperson that ever talked to them, and then got in the meeting and I took a different stance and I kind of, okay, here's why you're wrong about these 30 things. And immediately was back on the feet. Went through a proof of concept later, got the business, all good stuff. But my CRO was like, you were the person that could be in that room to do that. Anybody that was wearing the sales title would have never been able to do that. And so it's okay to push back sometimes if you think you're right. But you also have a lot of humility to go, they're the one trying to solve the problem, so what problem are they solving? And it's not I'm right, you're wrong, it's let's pivot you to show you there may be a better way to solve the problem you're trying to solve for. Sometimes the discussion is, here's the requirement, and it's not really the requirement. It's what they have interpreted sort of the subclass of the requirement to be, and if you can bring it up to a higher level and get to a different place, you might find that there's a path to win. So I think that's important, and the other piece is, again, I think we all are bad at risk management. I think COVID probably proved that for half the world. And when you look at trying to help them understand that there's a sort of consequence for not taking action, that is one of the things you're gonna need a lot of data and insights behind to help them see that and be very educational. I would say what we've done very well at, whether it was early stage or now, was being very educational in our approach, very educational in our marketing, very educational in our sales approach. I think for us in a new category, if you will, new market, that education, almost consultancy kind of approach, helped them find the problems that they were better fit to fix that actually got to the real requirements they had.
Well, and I think when you talk about a new category in particular, or a new area of technology, the importance of getting that right customer-facing set of relationships that don't just hear but know how to listen. Not what does the customer say, but what does the customer mean? And all too often, you kind of take things at face value, and you actually walk out with a false understanding of the conversation you just had, which is not actionable. As a result of that. I'm watching the clock here, and I've got another hour worth of questions I'd like to roll through. What I'd like to talk about is time to value. You know, the market has gone through these wild swings over the last 5 or 6 years from, you know, if you're doing cyber, you could get funded, you know, by 100 people at all sorts of insane valuations, to nobody's willing to write a check. You've got a corollary on the part of the customer, which is, hey, you know, yeah, we'll run a POC. It may take a few months to, I don't have time for a POC. I'm resource constrained. That kind of brings up this whole time to value conversation. And as a metric for whether or not a customer is likely to engage. You know, there are very few things where it's like, look, I'll go on an 18-month journey with you to see if this is a good idea. If I'm going to commit resources, which are scarce, I need to see an indicator of value, you know, on a compressed timeline. Talk a little bit about figuring that out. And Debbie, I'm going to start with you this time.
Yeah. So, especially in a new category, sales cycles can be long because there is not necessarily budget for it already. So being able to show value immediately, even if it's not all of the value that you can provide over the long term, but where you also want to think about adding value in addition to a POC or a POV is how can you help that decision maker? Because if they don't have budget, what can you do to help them along? Don't just show that this is a great product and here's the results and you know, here's how we're going to help you, but what are their challenges from a financing and funding perspective internally? How do they have to communicate with their CFO and or their board? And how can you help them? So that helps accelerate you know, even moving budget from one thing to another, and you might find that it's already there. So you know, in addition to accelerating time to value and finding how you can show that value in the littlest amount of time, how can you help them? And that will ultimately accelerate the sales process too.
Rob, you want to?
Yeah, I would just say no, in that time to value, so I agree with that, so I'm just going to take a bit of a different spin. For us, services was really important in that, of, hey, we can do a service assessment with the technology, and you'll pay us for the service assessment, and we'll show that value, which means you can be successful in that journey. And oh, by the way, we have this like managed hunting team after the purchase. They can use it too if you'd like. Where I'm painting a narrative for you there is what we didn't do is hide the value and in terms of the cost. So a lot of companies will go behind the scenes and do a lot of stuff for you, or in the early days, in the POV, your solutions architect is basically being a consultant, and maybe your customer success person is basically being their managed security team, and you're just bearing a lot of cost in your organization that customers don't mind paying for. If it's, I'm gonna show you value, so this is what you're paying for, as long as you're transparent with it, nobody minds paying for valuable things.
Sure.
But if you're telling them, this thing is magic and doesn't need all of this support, then they don't even actually structure or resource it correctly in their company, even if they don't want to use you. And then over time, that introduces churn where you didn't really explain to them what it was really going to take to be successful in the beginning. So I'm a big fan. I don't care about like valuations in the company that much and stuff. Like, we've been successful with that. Like, even in term sheets, I care about terms and long-term views a lot more than point-in-time valuations. I think the market multiples have always been stupid, and I was almost very happy to see the market crash when people were getting like 50x ARR numbers. I'm like, that is ridiculously stupid. But what I care about, yeah, term sheet, let's make sure we have a good track going forward. But I care about being treated fairly, and I think customers care about that as well. And so if I'm delivering you services around the product, or I'm delivering you something, I'm going to make sure I charge correctly for it. And you want that from a company, because then they're going to stick around longer and they actually have a way to be successful. So I would largely just say I'm a big fan of the Rihanna strategy in life, which is pay me what you owe me. If I'm going to deliver the value, pay for it. If I'm not delivering the value, don't. But let's not bury these costs, because I won't be here long term to be a partner for you if we do.
Stu?
Well, I think silence was maybe the best expression of this time to value, because it took us about 2.5 years to even develop the first product of any sort. And then it probably took another year and a half to actually get a valuable demonstration of what we were doing. I mean, it took a long time, but when we hit, I felt like we hit it. And that was what we called the unbelievable tour. Now, what we were doing is we were reframing the entire industry and saying, look, detect and respond is fine, but don't you want to prevent the attacks? Like, isn't that sort of why we're all in this? Instead of just like finding the fire in your bedroom at 2 a.m., don't you want to prevent the fire from actually starting? Well, that's us. But to show that, to demonstrate the power and simplicity of it, we came up with this unbelievable tour demo. And it really started at a board meeting because a couple of board members were still like, Stu, I still don't understand. Well, I don't get it. What are you trying to build here? And I remember saying, you know what? Let me just show you what I do to demo, the engineers, and what we're doing. And so I opened up my laptop. I took two, back then there were VMs, right? One that had my alma mater where I came from, McAfee, running on it, and another that had Cylance on it. And I then queried this repository of malware called VirusTotal, now owned by Google, and I asked it for the last 24 hours worth of malware, any kind of labeled as malware, bad stuff, right? I would download the 100 on the same two systems, and then I instantaneously, at the exact same time, ran all 100 pieces of brand new, fresh malware over the last 24 hours, and just sat back and enjoyed the show. Now, the show was McAfee's system would literally melt down in front of you. I mean, you were lucky to not get some image that you couldn't burn out of your brain to pop up on the screen. And then quietly, silently, Cylance simply ran. And I would show the processor being like barely pegged, and of course on McAfee it's full on with all memory. And it was pure silence. And I said, at the end, I'm like, so that's what you have today. This is what you can have tomorrow, right? You can have pure silence. And to just do the final kicker, I would show the date of the machine learning model when we built the model was at least a year and a half before the date that I ran, with no updates. So it was really simple. Look, we built this thing a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's still protecting you without ever an update on the system, just invisibly, behind the scenes, allowing you to sleep better at night. And so it was two things that really resonated with me. One, immediate self-evident value, right? You can just see it and you'd be like, oh, wow, okay, I get it. And then the second is creating a sense of urgency. And that's the whole well, wait, I have that red thing. Maybe I need to fix that. I need to change it, or yellow, or whatever it was. Now, we did that quite successfully for a couple of years until Symantec and McAfee came calling and then changing their EULAs to not allow for any public demonstration of test results in their EULAs. So if you agreed to install, and I feel pride, honestly, that I got the whole industry.
Got your attention?
I got the whole industry to change their EULAs just because of Cylance to prevent us sort of embarrassing them, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We're running down on time, and I've got two last questions that I want to make sure we get in. I have a bias, having built companies myself and having worked the journey with entrepreneurs to build quite a few companies over the years, of the importance of culture. And I have a bias that culture is an unfair competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to get just a real quick snippet from each of you on what are the 2 or 3 things you do to build culture in your organization. And Rob, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think anybody that talks about Dragos will bring up the culture and the quality of people we have there. And so I definitely believe in that. And I would say, I'm going to give the advice that probably sounds good, but it is also right. Then I'll give you the advice that probably sounds bad, but is really right. The good advice is know what your culture is, actually have an understanding of it, identify it, document it. What's your core values? Like at Dragos, we talk a lot about transparency, mission driven. We talk a lot about trust. And so we have these core values, and we incentivize the executive team and everyone on down to build that into the discussions. It's not just a slide said somewhere. It's cool. The salesperson doesn't come in with, oh, we won a $2 million deal. It's, oh, we're protecting 33 insulin manufacturing facilities because this is the mission and look what they're doing. And it's also $2 million that goes and fuels what we're doing. And so it's every layer we build that in, which I think is really, really important on that. And the employees all feel valued as shareholders with the transparency discussion. They all get the same insights that I would give to the board. There's no behind scenes, what's going on. The second piece of advice that sounds bad, but is actually my favorite piece of advice, is fire assholes. It is incredibly important to recognize that you have a good culture by the people you brought around you, and then somewhere along the line, you start getting jerks in your organization, and then it's hard to fire them, or let me document this, or what about that? And people leave because of bad managers, and culture dies because of bad people, not because of good folk. And I shouldn't say bad people. They may be successful people elsewhere, but not in your culture. So we have a very fast firing process at Dragos, and our HR team is aligned on that. We literally have something called Policy One, which is don't be an asshole. It is the guiding policy in the company, and if you cross it, there's no investigation or whatever required. You want to protect your people, but like a good example, I had an individual that sent inappropriate images to one of our female employees. She told him, please don't do that. He did it again. She came to me in the early days, like, what do you want to do about this? And I was like, yeah, he's gone today. When I was in the military, that would have been like a 3-month thing. That person ended up going and talking to all the rest of the people in our company. They're like, hey, we actually live up to our core values, and culture maintains. So just don't let people ruin your culture. Don't be afraid to fire fast.
Debbie?
If you don't control it, it takes on a life of its own. And culture is actually the expression of values. And so if you have a great culture, look at what the values are that's reflecting. And so one thing we do at our semi-annual meetings is we talk about how our values show up. Because you walk into an office and there's values on the wall, and that's just BS if you're not actually living them. So we have people give examples of how people are living the core values. And then the other thing is we make sure that our customers know what our core values are and that they know what examples are. They need to know what we stand for. I mean, you talked about being mission driven. We have values, and we make sure that in our relationship with our customers that they know why we exist. They know what to expect from our behavior. It's one thing to say we're honest and have integrity, but we need to show people and give examples so they know what to expect out of our relationship. They need to know, we have, transparency is another thing. They need to know that we want their feedback. If something's not going right, we want them to tell us, and we invite them to do that. And so communicating it with your employees, making sure you see, share what those examples are, and always, anytime we onboard a new customer, we go through that too.
Right. Stu?
I think mission really, really matters to me. I mean, it doesn't always mean that's the only way to success for aligning cultures, but man, for me, mission matters so much. So have a meaningful mission, number one. And then be absolutely religious zealots around hiring to that mission. So if you're bringing people on that are just trying to get an extra buck, or just want to run up on the stock, I just don't hire. I don't care how good they are, they'll be a toxin inside your company. So the more you can establish that strong mission that everybody aligns to, and then hire to that mission, and then of course enforce all along the way, you can do those 3 things, you're going to have a really nice, solid, ethos, if you will.
I'm going to beg our host for just a moment of forbearance. I want to ask you all one short question. Biggest mistake you've made on the journey? So Stu?
There's so many, it's hard to have a top one, but I'll try to guess. I think hiring quickly. I think, we had so much inbound request for POs that we literally didn't have anybody to respond to them. They would just drop. And so we ended knee-jerking into just hiring. It used to be called, bad breath is better than no breath, And that was talked about in the company because people were so desperately overworked. I would have not done that again, for sure.
Rob?
Yeah, I would say it kind of goes to this, but maybe on the other side, even though I just said fire fast, I use that when it's about the culture where I've not done a good job historically, and I've had to adapt over the last couple of years, and I think I'm getting better on it, is I've not fired really, really good people who are just not capable at that next level yet. And so I've got, I think, to my executive team where I've had some really amazing executives, just really good people, and they were great for the $10 to $50 million journey. But they were petering out at the $50 million to the $100 million journey. And it was but they're so good and they've done this, and they were here with us on the journey. It was yeah, but they're not going to be successful if I don't get them somewhere else. They're not going to be successful here, and I'm holding back the company not to make changes. So I think that it's still the firing fast. Even though I can fire fast in one area, I've struggled to fire fast on really, really good people that just weren't going to get us to where we needed to go.
Fair. Debbie?
Besides, a lot of the episodes of Silicon Valley reflect many of our mistakes. Well done, show. It's funny, mine relate to firing also. The business of the business is the easy part, the people's the hard part. And you know, a lot of times you'll hear an entrepreneur say, well, I can't let this person go because I'm so loyal. No, you're scared. You're scared because if you let the person go, it's going to cause more work to find somebody new, but it affects culture. And this has happened in my previous company. I kept somebody on way too long, and you know, it showed others that I wasn't living up to the values that we had established, and I learned my lesson.
Well, look, we're out of time. My apologies that we didn't get to questions. You know, maybe we have a moment or two to hang around in the back. You can direct your questions directly. I want to thank each of you. It's a great conversation.
Thanks.
First of all, it's great to see all of you. Appreciate you making the time to kind of share the journey and kind of what went right, what went wrong, what would you do differently. So thank you all very much, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bob.